Assignment for Self-Evaluation, Assessment Methods and Feedback by Isabel C, Anne Casey and Maureen Lancaster. The module that we are going to analyze is the module of Quality, Hygiene and Environmental Systems. This module is part of Level 1, so it's placed on the first year of studies of the Foundation Degree in Food Manufacture, Quality Assurance and Technical Management route. This course is a part-time based course, predominantly distance learning. Our students range in ages from 18 to 42 years old. Currently we have a cohort of 40 students that are full-time employed in the food industry. These students have come to us through different entry routes. They can have had their A-levels, they can have entered through vocational or A-level equivalent routes, and in these two cases it might happen that they haven't sat exams recently, so the habits of study are long in the past. The Quality and Hygiene Environmental module sits in the first year. The academic year begins in September with the induction week, where we have the opportunity of a face-to-face with our students. And next time we have this opportunity for a face-to-face is during study week at week 7. But the module itself starts in January 2016 and it goes on for 10 weeks until March 2016. During this time, all contact is through distance learning, except for the opportunity that we have during study week. Also to be noted, the Quality, Hygiene and Environmental Systems runs in parallel to another module, Raw Materials Control and Supply Management, and that's one of the considerations that we have in mind when setting up the assignments. So for the current assessment scheme has two ways of assessing, formative assessment methods that have their place during the study week, here at week 7, and along every week through the discussion board or email or other digital forms of communication. Then the summative assessment is divided into two written assignments. The first assignment set up in week 3 and weighs 60%, and the second assignment is placed on week 8 with a weight of 40%.
Looking at the current assessment scheme for this module, the current scheme is designed to be sensitive to the time constraints of a full-time employed student who may be juggling shift patterns and study. This type of assessment allows them to plan their own study time. Assignments allow sorting and presentation of an argument rather than clarification of facts, and scores high on the validity and medium on reliability, as demonstrated in the table. These are preferred attributes for a good assessment scheme. As such, it's better than the traditional essay assessment, which score low on validity and low on reliability. The assignment allows integration of work context for our learners and promotes deep learning and interest link, so when linking to Bloom's taxonomy, it encourages movement towards the higher level learnings of analyse and evaluate. This is by the use of work content promoting short-term application and lifelong learning, as cited by Bowd in 2000. However, student support networks at work varies from company to company, and this could be detrimental to their learnings. With our students being in full-time employment within the food industry, the ability to relate ideas to previous knowledge and motivation to understand is stronger. This encourages deep learning, as cited by Martin and Zaljo, 1976, rather than surface learning. So looking at the validity of the assessment, it depends on whether it actually measures the knowledge of skill it is designed to access as defined by Petty. The current assignment aligns well with the outcomes and measures a representative sample of the content of the module. It allows workplace examples to be included to demonstrate knowledge, comprehension and application, and promotes student-led learning as it accommodates different students' knowledge levels due to varying experience. A grading criteria is in place and is issued to the students in a time of assessment being set. This details the breakdown of the banded grades for the assignment and helps to support the student to achieve. Plagiarism is monitored via Turnitin and complemented by the encouragement of the addition of work-based examples alongside module content. This allows bespoke assignments to be created. Assignment does pose a potential problem with objectivity of scoring, but this robust grading criteria can accommodate this. Critique of the current practice shows some issues. Due to being distance learning, face-to-face teaching time is at a premium and only timetabled in study week. However, there are opportunities for the students to come to campus when they are able. This means that the formative assessment is weak and this module relies upon the summative assessment only. Assessment in the module are both written assignments. Although assignment has benefits in this situation, as discussed, this may disadvantage some students with poor writing skills as there is no variation and this is backed up by race. Long written assignments may be alien and not the norm at work, however the other methods are less suitable. Another disadvantage is the quantity of marking for the lecturer. This will only increase as student numbers increase and assignments require detailed reading to grade accurately. However, the grading criteria used ensures that when assessing, the same criteria are viewed, and this increases the validity and the reliability. Also, the use of second marking is employed currently to boost the validity and reliability when assessing students to ensure similar grades are being awarded. The use of second marking in the grading system is becoming more relevant now that the numbers are increasing and marking may be outsourced to the principal lecturer. This is to ensure that it is fair on all students, as grading will be assessed to the same standards by whoever marks it. This also allows auditing to be easier when monitoring marking and grading.
The current methods of feedback utilised are predominantly electronic, posted on Blackboard. This is driven by constraints imposed by distance learning. An oral summary is provided on Turnitin, designed to personalise this feedback. This poses a challenge to current practice since, whilst not discounting the other options, face-to-face is the most potent form of feedback, as stated by Phil Race of 2007 and the NUS Charter of 2010. This is available in study week or ad hoc at the request of the student at a time suitable to them. This oral feedback is available by phone, subject to the availability, to allow discussion between tutor and student on specific concerns. Deadlines for feedback are detailed to each student to ensure timely communication. This is visible to the student in the scheme of work. We follow current university guidelines on feedback. Individual and personal feedback is archived on Blackboard and is thus easily accessible for future reference. In addition, feedback is given on the draft submissions of the first assessment to give students a very early benchmark of course expectations. Race and the NUS Charter, as mentioned earlier, on assessment and feedback supports that formative assessment should be used throughout the programme. They also advocate that face-to-face is offered for at least the first piece of assessment each academic year. This option is currently not scheduled as study week is prior to feedback deadline, as you can see on the graph. If feedback was scheduled during study week, this not only permits a face-to-face opportunity, but also allows students to take account of feedback prior to submission of assessment 2. Feedback should be marked, grade and comments as cited in Rees and Walker, and this again is our good practice. Submission of work is allowed, resubmission of work is allowed, as Bowd and Sadler say. This promotes the feedback loop and encourages students to improve their work based on the feedback. Petty found that if the feedback is delivered by the medal and mission statement, this will promote action from the students as to what is needed to improve their performance. Challenges of current feedback scheme. As a summary, as a result of the distance learning, there is limited face-to-face. Yet, where opportunities are available, they are not being exploited. Feedback reaction and potential benefits are unable to be assessed by the tutor at the time of feedback, as using written feedback, as stated earlier, face-to-face is the most potent form of feedback, so follow up with face-to-face and also clear lines of communication available and utilised. In the current schedule, timing of feedback is the week after the second assessment has just been set. This provides little time to take on board the feedback and turn it into action. Written feedback precludes the additional communication and reinforcement benefits offered by face-to-face. Much can be gained in assessing students' comprehension through witnessing student reaction to feedback, for example. Electronic feedback has its benefits, as the record of feedback is equally as important as the content, as cited in the Sheffield Hallam paper of 2010. It found that students benefit from the release and store of feedback on Blackboard and regard this electronic version as the hub of learning. As the learning materials are in this form too, it reinforces the relevance of this medium for assessment and feedback. Also, electronic feedback release is fair as all students receive it at the same time. This can then be accessed at a time and a place that is suitable for them, which is not governed by timetable or being on campus. Technology Feedback Action cites Price and O'Donovan of 2008, who suggest that receiving feedback when emotionally ready, as well as a place of own choice, does encourage student engagement.
So, reflecting on the current practice, the assessment scheme could be modified to allow improvements in student feedback and application to subsequent assignments by the restructure of the assignments to include a mark for continuous assessment at 10%. This would include discussion board participation, activities and quizzes, allowing greater formative assessment. As these contribute to the final grade for the module, the students are encouraged to fully participate in these activities. The continuous assessment also promotes student engagement through use of the discussion board and sharing of learning. This enhances the student experience. Ray states it is often the more intimate context of small groups that the making sense side of learning really gets going. This is something we need to encourage with our distance learning students. This is also supported by Marriott and Lau 2008 and cited by Miller, Imrie and Cox 1998, who agree that these continuous assessment methods, such as e-assessments delivered via Blackboard or a VLE, increase student engagement. Wilson et al. 2011 also found that using computer-administrated multi-choice questions as formative assessment has a positive impact on student performance. The other recommendations are modifying the weighting of the assessment to make the second assessment a higher weighting and therefore allow more learning to be applied in a timely manner. This may enhance student learning and allows feedback to be gained prior to the second assessment, which is not possible in the current format, and also face-to-face feedback in study week, as backed up by Sadler in 1989, that students benefit from timely face-to-face feedback. Group learning has never been more important as it is now, and this allows student-led learning and can minimise the possible effects of feeling isolated, as stated by Race. This is addressed by the study week falling after the first feedback and before the second assignment. This allows time for group reflection in study week, which is particularly important for our learners. Another, more progressive change could be to move to 5 smaller assignments to include presentations, smaller assignments or tests. These would be scheduled regularly through the module, covering smaller topics from the module content. These smaller and more frequent assessments would provide the lecturer with an evolving picture of the progress of individual students and the cohort, which will enable the lecturer to adjust learning material to reflect the speed of learning as cited by Angelo and Cross. Moving assessments into smaller and increasing numbers might mean the student receives too much feedback and overwhelms them as to what is needed to close the gaps in learning. It would be prudent to embrace Lunsford 1997 and practice that only 3 pieces of well thought through feedback comments are made. This is also key with the student numbers on the rise, so the change in assessment format and the type need to be closely evaluated regularly. To encourage student-led learning, the student could be given a choice at the start of the module which assessment scheme they would prefer individually. This would allow the student to have responsibility for their learning. The idea of student as producer encourages a development of collaborative relations between student and academic for the production of knowledge. In this situation of distance learning, the individual's work life and responsibilities may play a part in which scheme they choose. One may be preferred due to ongoing work commitments at certain times. This ownership would allow the student to take control of their study.
Freeman and Lewis of 1989, in discussing assessment, regard feedback as providing an opportunity for dialogue, where dialogue is not only promotes a deeper understanding of the feedback given, but also promotes discourse on the subject area itself. This approach promotes student understanding of the feedback, as Chanak of 2000 and Hayland of 2000 studies found. The process needs a flow of assessment, feedback, thus visibility of the gap will become apparent. It requires a two-way process between the tutor and student. This leads well onto adaptive release of feedback, whereby students would reflect on the written feedback before a grade is issued. Technology Feedback Action found that the creation of an action plan was facilitated when students fully understand the adaptive release of grade system. Similarly, Sadler reasoned that students benefited from feedback which engaged in action to bridge gaps in learning. Adaptive release would address the findings of Chanak 2000 and Hayland 2000, who found that students were not able to action the feedback to close the gap on their shortfall of learning. To allow progression on feedback, we would adopt a rubrics marking scheme. The HEA, Enhanced Student Learning, through formative feedback paper, refers to Hounsell of 1997. He discovered that the gap in the student and the tutor criteria for assessment were not aligned. Burton of 1990 also found this to be the case. To address this rubrics marking scheme could be shared to outline clear expectations and give visibility of the expected learning outcomes and goals of the assessment. If there's no alignment at the outset of the assessment, feedback will not lead to action, bridging the gap of the learning. Hounsell, 1997, rubrics also help students become more thoughtful judges of the quality of their own work and others. It is also said to reduce the amount of time tutors spend evaluating students' work. With the increase of student numbers year on year, as we've mentioned, this scheme would balance the increase in workload as well as help the student self-evaluate their own work effectively. Self-assessment, including a wiki style for assessment and feedback, as the NUS Charter Point 8 states, students being encouraged to self-critique and peer review. York 2000 and Bowd of 1986 also argue the importance of tutors building on the skills of student self-assessment as well as the quality of feedback. With increased assessment and more frequent feedback, the student will be encouraged to build on the self-evaluation such as the tutor would have. This could be achieved by self-marking second assessment and adding predictive grade for comparison to final grade and feedback from tutor. This could be further monitored through the generation of a reflective journal that would be completed throughout the course and monitored by personal tutors.
So the future for this the assessment of this module is built on continuing good existing practices, but also building on the points that can be improved. We need to continue to cater to our specific student needs, and one way of improving will be to provide oral feedback on drafts submitted, and also continue to overcome the technology gap and providing feedback through use of Skype or use of other technologies such as Wiki, Padlet, and others. The process of the construction of this presentation has been through a series of group meetings and individual work. First, we have analyzed the assignment brief and the current situation of the assessment and feedback of the module. Then individually we have read through the subjects that needed addressing, and through a series of meetings we composed our ideas, discussed and decided on what assessments and feedbacks to propose, and we created a common structure for the presentation. Then individually we constructed bits of a presentation that was then in group compiled and recorded. This is the end of this presentation.